more than 7 out of every 10 young people 18 to 24 are considering leaving. They figure they'll have better quality of life and better opportunities, including the chance to own their own home abroad. Has Ireland failed them? Yes, indeed. More than 7 in every 10 young Irish people aged 18 to 24 are thinking of leaving, thinking of just bailing out. They've had enough. They see no prospects, no future here. They see greener pastures. They see more opportunities abroad. Now, I came out of school in the 80s, in the mid 80s, and I can relate to this because back in the 80s kind of like a lost decade of economic. It was an economic disaster. It just seemed like all the way through my high school years, my teen years, it was taken as a given that there was no jobs. It was taken as a given that you had really no prospects here, unless you managed by some means to get into the banks or into the civil service, which competition for such jobs was immense. So a lot of my generation, a lot of my friends simply left school and left Ireland. Some have come back and some never did. So yes, I can relate to this, the findings of this latest report, because in spite of the fact that by most metrics that you can think of, Ireland today, thanks to a number of factors, not least the EU pumping us full of cheap money and cheap credit, Ireland is better off. I mean, we're no longer that Ireland of the 1980s. We supposedly are a wealthy country. We supposedly have a much improved infrastructure, much improved services. So the powers that be would lead you to believe. So what has gone wrong? What has gone wrong that more than 7 out of every 10 young people are thinking the way my generation thought back in the 1980s when the country was broke? That was our excuse. We were leaving because the country was essentially broke and had no jobs to offer us. Nowadays we're supposedly rich, and yet still our young generation is thinking of leaving. Let's hop on over here to thejournal.ie. Now, the Journal is not one of my favorite publications. They are a little bit too far on the left end of the spectrum and too much part of the establishment, the progressive woke establishment that currently runs Ireland. The journal.ie is an outlet, a media outlet that, for my money, just parrots the current regime's message in most cases. So I don't have a lot of time for them. I'll be straight up with you there. I'm not going to. You've probably heard me say it before. But you have to read all sources, because it's the only way you get any kind of a balanced view of what's going on. And look, even publications that I don't agree with ideologically, the likes of The Guardian and The Journal and all these, you know, Vox and a few of these other things. Yeah, I don't agree with them ideologically, but sometimes they have good stories, and sometimes they have pertinent stories, and stories that are interesting and that make for interesting reading and interesting thought experiments. So let's see what the Journal has to say on this, because this popped up and I thought it was rather interesting, because it reminds me of very much, it evokes a time in my life where I was part of this kind of thinking, and a lot of my friends and peers were also. So it very much hit home. So let's read what the Journal has to say about this latest survey, which has popped up in recent days. And the headline here, as you can see, is majority of young people considering moving abroad for better quality of life. And that's exactly the position my generation was in the 1980s. Over 8 in 10 are also, quote, fearful for the future. Right, according to the Journal, doesn't say who wrote this, but sure, we'll just carry on anyway. More than 7 in 10 young people aged 18 to 24 are considering moving abroad because they think they would enjoy a better quality of life elsewhere. That's according to research carried out by Red Sea on behalf of the National Youth Council of Ireland. The National Youth Council of Ireland, NYCI, has expressed concern at the findings of the survey, and they should be, which were published today, because these people, the 18 to 24 year old age group, these are the fresh blood. These are the fresh, educated blood of your economy, of your society. And so if they're all going to up sticks and move away, you're kind of, you're digging out the foundation of your whole way of life, your whole society. Let's continue. 1,253 respondents aged 18 and over, spread across all regions of the Republic of Ireland, took part in the survey, of which 151 were aged 18 to 24. Polling took place from August the 19th to August the 24th, so it's a recent survey. Fresh off the press, as they say. The representative body for voluntary youth organisations in Ireland said it shows, quote, the severe impact the cost of living crisis is having on young people in Ireland. And it has issued a call for action from the government to prevent young people from moving abroad. Well, yes, as was the case back in the 80s and is the case now, the government has quite obviously failed somewhere along the line. They've got a few things wrong, or got a lot of things wrong, and they've made some missteps, and they've now created a society today and conditions today which I and everybody around me here in Ireland, in the Republic, are living through. The inflation has gone crazy. I know that's a world thing, but in Ireland we have an absolute disaster of a housing crisis which has been fermenting for years, and the government seems to be hell-bent on still hoovering in as many people from abroad as they can possibly entice into a country that has no accommodation. So yes, and of course, if you have supply and demand going out of whack, I don't think you need to be an economic genius to work out that that's going to drastically pump up the value of property. And when you do that, who loses out most? The young people. Young people just can't get in on the game. They just can't get a foothold. And that's part of the problem here. Let's read on and see if I'm right. Key findings. Among those surveyed aged 18 to 24, 8 in 10 said they are fearful of the future, and half reported worse mental health in the light of the rising cost of living crisis. More than 4 in 10 responded that they are not as happy as they were 6 months ago. Close to half said they are struggling to make ends meet, and more than a quarter said their experience with housing in the past 6 months is worse. Well, that goes without saying. The housing situation here is an absolute catastrophe. Even before the thing got extremely bad, we already had 10,000 Irish people homeless on the streets. I've covered that before. So already there was a problem, and they've just poured petrol on the flames, as far as I can see, by enticing tens, if not hundreds of thousands of more people to come into the country. And there's already no accommodation for the people here, it seems. Let's continue. Paul Gordon is the Director of Policy and Advocacy at National Youth Council of Ireland. Paul Gordon said that while the cost of living crisis is affecting all of society, quote, it is impacting young people in a different way. Commenting on some key findings, he added, they are more likely to report mental health difficulties, challenges with accommodation, and to spend a greater portion of their income on education and public transport expenses. Well, they have less income to start with, so these things loom large. Even your bus fares and buying a packet of crisps looms a lot larger when you have a meagre or a low income than it does when you get on a bit older and you should be earning a bit more. Quote, unfortunately, an overwhelming majority feel a better quality of life can be achieved elsewhere. We're concerned that unless young voices are heard in this budget, many will choose to leave. And I resonate with that, because many of my generation did in fact leave. They did. There was a massive clear out back in the mid-80s, especially from rural Ireland to the big destinations, where obviously the States, the United States, Australia was another big one, and the UK was of course a closer option. But yeah, so I totally get this, but I'm staggered. I'm staggered in the light of the fact that all this supposed progress that the state has made, and that we're told that we've made, and we've, you know, we're now playing with the big boys, and we're part of the cool kids club, and we're still back to this. And really, you know, with the collapse in the birth rate, you really don't want to be hemorrhaging your young people, your young, educated, energetic people. They are you don't want to be losing those. You really don't. You need those. Anyway, we'll continue on. The National Youth Council of Ireland, the NYCI, says targeted action is needed from government. As a part of its pre-budget submission, the body has called on the government to 1. Reduce registration fees for those in college, higher education or on apprenticeships. 2. Raise the national minimum wage for under 20s to the same level as over 20s. 3. Well, I think that makes sense, really. I mean, if you're 19 versus somebody who's 20, you doing the same job? Probably. Bring the rate of job seekers allowance for under 25s in line with that of those over 25, and extend the young adult travel card to more young people, and increase government investment in youth work services in local communities. Okay, well, I don't think I'd have an issue with all of that myself. I can't see a problem there, but I'm sure the government will have a different view, probably to do with budgetary concerns. Paul Gordon said there is strong support across all age groups for our proposals. Well, I'd be okay with that. Yeah, I could see that, at least, you know, doing something. Not sure if it would solve the problem. I mean, if you can't afford a house, this isn't going to change it. But I suppose you've got to start somewhere. To heed the message, he called on the government to heed the message that young people and the wider public are sending in this research. He added that our leaders need to show young people that they are a valued part of society and that they are not left out of the conversation on the cost of living. We have no future here is the next heading. A 24-year-old female from Ulster, Connacht, who was surveyed, said she and the majority of her friends have plans to leave Ireland by the end of the year. And I remember, as I said, I remember these times. This is what we talked about, you know, in my late teens. This was the hot button topic: who will go and who will stay, and where will you go? And you know, that was very much a whole generation was lost. A whole generation was lost. Elsewhere, a 20-year-old female from Dublin said, "I think this crisis is making people my age think we have no future here, and that they should move abroad." Meanwhile, a 24-year-old female, was it all females? Journal.ie, could you only find females for this? Was there no lads? See what I mean? The Journal. Meanwhile, a 24-year-old female, also from Dublin, worried that she is, quote, never going to be able to buy a house. And that's, if things keep going the way they're going now, that could be the truth. She said she has worked since she was 16 and has saved 30 grand. Fair play to you. But it is still not enough to buy a house near where she lives. It's probably enough to buy a house anywhere. Make a difference. I don't want to make a difference. Sorry, Journal, I don't want to make a difference. You're all right. You'll have to carry on without me. So yes, this is a story that resonates with me, because yes, it seems like we're deja vu. We're back to where we were in the 1980s. In the 1980s, I mean, the country was a wasteland. There was just no money around. There was no jobs around. And the government was constantly strapped for funds, constantly. And the whole decade seemed to have been this big kind of big societal and economic wasteland, a complete disaster zone. And my generation was just happened to be caught up in it because we were the people coming out of school at that time, and we were pretty much being told and being prepped by our teachers and by the people who were advising us that look, there's really nothing we can tell you. There's just nothing there. You might want to just kind of cast the net a bit wider and look at other options. And it was just part of the way it was. And I'm saddened and I'm frustrated that in this supposed age of our new found prosperity, where Ireland is no longer like how it was, everything's different now, we're different, we're way ahead of those people. They knew nothing, they were all just living in the dark ages. Not like us today. We're so progressive, we're so virtuous, we're so woke, we've got loads of money and better roads, and Google and Twitter and Apple and all these people are put their headquarters here. And yet, in spite of all that, in spite of all this supposed largesse, the flower of Irish youth sees no future here. Something is wrong. Something is very, very wrong. No other way to put it. The government is responsible.